My name is Cora Sterling. For as long as I can remember, my life has been measured in textures and colors. The rough, giving soil of my mother's garden under my fingernails, the smooth, cool slip of wet silk through my fingers, the deep, moody blue of an indigo dye bath that smells of earth and time. I am a textile artist. I work with natural dyes, coaxing color from madder root, pomegranate skins, and eucalyptus leaves. My studio, a converted boat shed overlooking the marshy waterways of Port Blossom, is a sanctuary of quiet labor. It's a small world, but it is wholly mine, built on patience and a deep respect for the slow, honest process of creation. My mother, Iris, is the source of this respect. She's the manager of the Oak Haven Community Garden, a sprawling, chaotic paradise of raised beds and rambling vines tucked away in the city's oldest district. She doesn't command the earth, she coaxes it, listens to it. She can tell by the curl of a leaf what a plant needs, and she carries that same intuitive gentleness into every part of her life. She raised me on her own in a small, second-floor apartment where the scent of baking bread and damp potting soil was a constant comfort. We never had much in the way of money, but we had a richness of a different kind in the stories she'd tell while weeding, in the shared silence of watching a sunset paint the marsh gold, in the unwavering belief she had in me. A belief that felt more solid than any inheritance. She taught me that true value isn't in what you own, but in what you can cultivate. Anything worth having, Cora, she'd say, her hands covered in dirt, takes time to grow. Be patient with the seeds. It was a lesson about gardening, of course, but it was also a lesson about life. It was this life, this quiet, rooted world of mine, that Leo Davenport found so captivating. We met at a local art fair where I was demonstrating the shibori dyeing process. He stood for a long time, watching me bind a length of white linen with thread, his gaze intense and curious. He worked for his family's firm, Davenport Legacy Holdings, a private equity giant that specialized in acquiring and revitalizing historic properties. A sterile term for what was often a gutting of a place's soul to make way for luxury condos and boutique hotels. He was handsome in that polished, old-money way, with a smile that seemed both confident and a little sad. "You make it look like magic," he said, his voice a low counterpoint to the market's cheerful buzz. "It's just chemistry and patience," I replied, dipping the bound cloth into a vat of indigo. He was different from his family, or so I believed. He seemed to possess a genuine yearning for the authenticity he felt was missing from his own life. He loved my studio, the way the light fell through the dusty windows, the earthy smell of the dye pots. He'd watch me work for hours, asking thoughtful questions. He listened to my stories about my mother, about our small apartment, about the simple joys that defined my childhood. He called my life real and his own a gilded cage. "You see the soul in things, Cora," he told me one evening as we sat on the dock outside my studio, our feet dangling over the dark water. "My family, they only see the balance sheet. I want to learn to see what you see." I fell in love with the man I thought he wanted to be. I saw him not as a Davenport, but as Leo, a gentle soul trapped in a world of sharp edges and cold transactions. I believed our love could be a bridge between his world and mine, a place where his resources and my vision could create something beautiful together. When he proposed a year later, with a simple, elegant ring that he said reminded him of a river stone, I said yes. I believed we were building our own legacy, one that was separate from the imposing shadow of his family name. The first cracks appeared during the wedding planning. His mother, Eleonora, a woman whose compliments felt like audits, scrutinized every choice I made. My desire for hand-dyed linen napkins was met with a tight smile and a suggestion for something more refined. My wish for a small, intimate ceremony in the community garden was gently but firmly overruled in favor of the Devereaux estate, a sprawling, columned mansion on the outskirts of town with a history as opulent as it was troubling. "It's a family tradition, darling," Eleonora had explained, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "The Davenports have celebrated their milestones at the Devereaux for generations." Leo's role was always that of the peacekeeper. "Just let her have this one, Cora," he'd plead in a whisper. "It means a lot to her. It's not about us, it's just tradition." My mother, Iris, navigated their world with a quiet dignity that I found both heartbreaking and heroic. We went for a pre-wedding dinner at the Davenport sterile, minimalist mansion, a place of glass walls and cold, white marble that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. Iris, dressed in a simple, beautifully made dress she'd sewn herself, brought them a gift, a collection of rare heirloom seeds from her garden, carefully packaged in hand-folded paper envelopes. Eleonora accepted the box with the tips of her fingers, as if it might be contaminated. How quaint, she'd murmured, setting it aside on a vast, empty table. Throughout the dinner, Leo's father, Marcus, a man whose presence filled a room with an unnerving, proprietary silence, steered the conversation towards business and influence. He spoke of my work with a sort of anthropological curiosity. "It's truly fascinating, this craft revival," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "To think one can make a living from such, well, elemental things." He made my life's work sound like a charming, but ultimately insignificant hobby. My mother said little, her hands resting calmly in her lap. But I saw the way her gaze would drift to the sterile, manicured gardens outside the window, a place of controlled, lifeless beauty so different from the vibrant chaos of her own. On the drive home, she placed a hand on my arm. "They're different from us, Cora," she said softly. "But Leo loves you. That's what matters." I held on to that belief like a talisman. I told myself that their world was not my world, and that Leo and I would build our own. I convinced myself that their condescension was a product of their ignorance, not malice, and that once we were married, they would see me not as a curious acquisition, but as family. I was wrong. The rehearsal dinner was the beginning of the end. It was held in the Devereux Estate's grand dining hall, a cavernous room with ceilings so high they seemed to swallow the light. A single, impossibly long table was set for 50 of the Davenports' closest friends and family. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I sat beside Leo, feeling like a carefully curated object on display, a testament to the Davenport family's broad-mindedness. My mother sat across from me. She wore a simple, elegant dress of deep marine blue that she had found at a consignment shop and tailored to fit her perfectly. Her silver hair was pinned up in a graceful knot, and her face, though lined with the years of hard work and worry, was serene. She looked beautiful, a point of calm authenticity in a room of polished facades. Marcus stood to give the first toast. He raised his crystal glass, the light fracturing through it. "To Leo and Cora," he began, his voice resonating through the hushed room. "We are so thrilled to welcome Cora into our family. It's not every day you meet a young woman of such surprising talents." He paused, letting the word surprising hang in the air. "She is a testament to the fact that ambition can blossom in the most unexpected of places. She has pulled herself up and created a name for herself, armed with little more than her own 2 hands and an admirable tenacity. We are so proud of what she has overcome." A polite, muted ripple of applause followed. He had managed to frame my entire life as a struggle I had to escape, rather than a foundation I had built upon. I felt a hot flush of anger, but I caught my mother's eye. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Stay calm. Let it pass." Then Eleonora rose, her smile as sharp and thin as a shard of glass. "I'd like to add to that," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Cora, you bring a wonderful earthiness to our family. A connection to the simpler, more fundamental things. And I believe we have your mother, Iris, to thank for that." She turned her gaze directly to my mother. Every eye in the room followed. My mother met her stare without flinching, her expression placid. "It takes a certain kind of strength to spend one's life working in the soil," Eleonora continued, her tone dripping with false admiration. "To be so grounded. It's a gift, really. A skill that doesn't come from prestigious schools or formal training, but from a much more, shall we say, hands-on place. We are just so delighted that you could join us this evening." It was a masterclass in passive aggression, a speech that simultaneously praised and dismissed my mother in the same breath. My hands were clenched into fists under the table. I could feel Leo's hand find mine, his thumb stroking the back of it in a gesture that was meant to be soothing, but felt like an appeal for my silence. The dinner continued, a blur of sophisticated food I couldn't taste and conversations I couldn't follow. I was trapped in a bubble of suffocating politeness. I excused myself, needing a moment of air, and made my way towards the French doors that led to a veranda. As I passed a small alcove where Eleonora was chatting with two of her friends, their laughter tinkled like ice in a glass. I paused, hidden by a large floral arrangement. "She's a lovely girl, of course," one of the women was saying. "A bit rustic, but Leo seems smitten." "Oh, completely," Eleonora replied, and then she delivered the final, fatal blow. I heard her voice, clear as a bell, laced with a casual cruelty that stole the breath from my lungs. The mother, though. My goodness. Did you see her dress? I do admire the effort, but you can't dress up a weed and call it a rose. She looks like the hired help. A wave of soft, conspiratorial laughter followed. And through it, I heard another sound. A soft chuckle from beside them. It was Leo. He had followed me from the table and had been standing there, listening. He laughed. It wasn't a loud, cruel laugh. It was something far worse, a small, social, complicit chuckle. The kind of sound you make when you want to belong, even if it means betraying someone you claim to love. In that instant, everything fell away. The Devereaux estate, the wedding, the carefully constructed future I had imagined with him, it all dissolved into a cold, hard clarity. The man I loved wasn't a captive in a gilded cage. He was a willing warden. He had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. A profound, quiet calm settled over me. It was not rage, but resolution. I turned from my hiding spot and walked back to the table, my steps steady. Leo was already there, his face a mask of nervous concern. "Cora, he started to whisper. I didn't look at him. I looked at my mother. Her face was still serene, but I could see the hurt in her eyes, a deep, weary sadness that she was trying so hard to hide for my sake. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her skin was cool. "Mom," I said, my voice clear and even in the quiet hum of the room. "We're leaving." Heads turned. The conversations faltered. Leo grabbed my arm. "Cora, what are you doing? Don't make a scene." "I'm not," I said, pulling my arm free and looking at him for the first time. I saw not the man I thought I knew, but a stranger, a weak reflection of his parents. "I'm ending one." I stood up, and my mother stood with me. I looked down the long, opulent table at the sea of confused and startled faces. I looked at Eleonora, whose smile had finally vanished, replaced by a flicker of alarm. I looked at Marcus, his expression hardening into disapproval. "Thank you all for this evening," I said, my voice not loud, but carrying in the sudden silence. "And thank you for the clarity. It's a gift I will not soon forget." Without another word, my mother and I turned and walked out of the grand dining hall. We walked past the uniformed staff, through the cavernous marble foyer, and out the heavy oak doors into the cool night air. Behind us, a confused murmur erupted, the sound of a carefully orchestrated world coming undone. But I didn't care. I was walking away from the suffocating grandeur and back towards something real. Holding my mother's hand, I felt not like I had ruined my life, but like I had just finally saved it. The Salty Spoon isn't a diner, but it holds the same kind of sanctuary. It's a small, 24-hour cafe tucked away on a pier overlooking the water, a place smelling of salt, fried shrimp, and strong coffee. It's a haven for fishermen, early-rising artists, and anyone else seeking refuge at odd hours. For my mother and me, it had always been our place. We'd come here to celebrate small victories, a good grade, a sold-out craft market, and to weather small defeats. The worn wooden booths held the imprint of our history. We slid into our usual booth by the window. The waitress, a kind woman named Sophia who had watched me grow up, brought over 2 mugs without a word. One with black coffee for me, one with chamomile tea for my mother. She saw my mother's elegant dress and my own, and the stark absence of a fiancé, but she had the grace to ask no questions. We sat in a silence that was not empty, but full of unspoken understanding. It was the kind of silence we had always shared, a space where words weren't necessary. Outside, the dark water lapped gently against the pilings. The foghorn moaned its low, mournful song in the distance. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice soft. You didn't have to do that, Cora. We could have just endured it. It was only one night. I looked at her, at the strength in her quiet face, the resilience that had been her shield for so many years. No, Mom, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We're done enduring. We're done making ourselves small so that other people can feel big. You taught me to cultivate things, not to let them be trampled. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. I just wanted you to be happy, she whispered. I am, I said, and the surprising thing was, it was true. In the wreckage of my cancelled wedding, I felt a strange and powerful sense of peace. I'm happier right now, sitting here with you, than I ever was in that house. We stayed for over an hour, drinking our coffee and tea, watching the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the sky. We talked not of the Davenports or the disastrous dinner, but of the garden, of a new variety of tomato she was trying to grow, of a commission I had just received for a large-scale textile installation. We were rebuilding our world, one quiet conversation at a time. When we got back to my small apartment above my studio, the sun was rising over the marsh, turning the water and sky into a wash of soft pink and gold. My mother went to lie down in the guest room exhausted. I, however, felt a surge of energy, a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I went to my desk and turned on my computer. For months, I had been watching with a growing sense of dread as Davenport Legacy Holdings circled one of the city's most important landmarks, the old Oakhaven textile mill. It was a beautiful, crumbling brick building on the river, the very heart of the historic artisan district. It was where the city's weavers and dyers had worked for over a century. It had been shuttered for years, and now Davenport Legacy was in the final stages of a deal to purchase it. Their plan, which they'd touted in the local business journal, was to gut the interior and convert it into a luxury hotel and condominiums, erasing its history entirely. I had spoken to Leo about it, pleading with him to consider a different approach, one that would preserve the building's character and create space for the artisan community. He had been sympathetic but dismissive. It's a business decision, Cora, he'd said. The numbers just don't work for a community project. But sitting there, in the quiet light of a new day, I realized something. My art, the work the Davenports had dismissed as a quaint craft, had become successful. Over the past few years, through collaborations with ethical fashion designers and several high-profile commissions, I had quietly built a considerable savings. I had more than just a voice, I had resources. And I had something the Davenports would never understand, a community. I spent the next 2 days on the phone. I called every artist, craftsman, and small business owner I knew in the Oakhaven district. I called the head of the city's Historical Preservation Society. I called a contact I had at a progressive architectural firm that specialized in adaptive reuse. I laid out the situation, the threat to the mill, the heart of our community. And then I proposed a different plan. Not a protest, but a purchase. The idea was met with an explosion of energy and support. People didn't just offer their signatures on a petition, they offered their skills, their time, their own small savings. The architect I called, a brilliant woman named Zoe, offered to draw up a pro bono proposal for a new vision for the mill, a mixed-use space with affordable artist studios, workshops, a public gallery, a marketplace for local goods, and a small, community-owned cafe. It was a plan built not on profit margins, but on cultural preservation and sustainable community. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected place. One of my largest commissions had been from a foundation run by a woman named Isabel Thorne. She was an older, fiercely intelligent philanthropist who had inherited a fortune and now dedicated her life to funding arts and environmental projects. She had been a mentor to me, and she despised firms like Davenport Legacy. I called her and laid out our plan. I told her about the community collective we were forming, which we were calling the Oakhaven Trust. I told her how much we had managed to pool together. It was a fraction of what Davenport Legacy was offering, but our proposal was about more than money. Isabel listened patiently. When I was finished, there was a long pause. They see a building, Cora, she finally said, her voice warm. You see a lifeline. That's the kind of investment I like to make. By the end of the week, with a low-interest loan from Isabel's foundation backing the Oakhaven Trust, we had what we needed. Zoe's stunning architectural proposal was complete, and we had a petition with over 5,000 signatures from the local community. We didn't go to the Davenports. We went directly to the city council, who own the property. We submitted our offer and our proposal on the very day the council was set to approve the sale to Davenport Legacy. The world of the Davenports did not collapse overnight in a storm of scandal. It was something quieter and perhaps more devastating. Their world shrank. The city council meeting was public. The room was packed with artists, shopkeepers, and residents of the Oakhaven district. I stood before the council and presented our vision for the mill. I spoke of its history, of its importance to our city's identity, of a future where development didn't mean erasure. I spoke of a model of prosperity that was measured not just in dollars, but in community well-being, in culture, in soul. Marcus and a team of his lawyers were there. They presented their glossy brochures and financial projections. They spoke of tax revenues and luxury tourism. But their presentation, which would have seemed so powerful a week ago, now felt hollow and predatory in a room full of people whose lives and livelihoods were at stake. The council, facing immense public pressure and presented with a viable, fully funded, and widely supported alternative, did the unthinkable. They voted against the sale to Davenport Legacy. They voted in favor of the Oakhaven Trust. It was a small headline in the grand scheme of things. Local artisan group secures historic mill, but the ripples were significant. It was a public rejection, a sign that the Davenport's brand of ruthless development was no longer an inevitability. It made them look weak, out of touch. I heard through the grapevine that two of their major investors, spooked by the display of public opposition, pulled their funding from a similar project in another city. Their reputation for being unstoppable was, for the first time, broken. A week later, Leo showed up at my studio. He looked tired, diminished. The polished confidence was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability I had never seen before. "Cora," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Can I come in?" I nodded, gesturing to a simple wooden stool. He sat, his eyes scanning the familiar space, the vats of dye, the skeins of yarn hanging from the rafters, the bolts of cloth, as if seeing it for the first time. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "For what my mother said. For laughing. It was unforgivable. I was a coward." "Yes, you were," I said, not unkindly. I felt no anger towards him now, only a deep, weary pity. "I didn't know about the mill," he said, looking up at me, his eyes pleading. "I mean, I knew the company was buying it, but I didn't know you were." "I would never have let it happen." "Wouldn't you have, Leo?" I asked softly. "You let them humiliate my mother. You stood by and did nothing. Why would the fate of a building be any different?" It was never about the building. Just like it was never about the dress. It was about respect. It was about whose life, whose work, whose mother has value. And in that room, you made your choice clear. He flinched, the truth of my words hitting him. "I love you, Cora. I made a terrible mistake." I walked over to a pot of marigold dye simmering on a hot plate, the air filled with its sweet, earthy scent. "I used to think that love was enough," I said, stirring the golden liquid. "That it could bridge any gap. But it can't. Not without respect. Not without courage. You don't love me, Leo. You love the idea of me. You love what I represent, something authentic you can own. But you were never willing to stand in my world to defend it. You only ever wanted to bring me into yours." Tears welled in his eyes. "Is there any way to fix this?" I shook my head slowly, a profound sadness settling in my chest. "Some things, once they are broken, can't be mended. You can't undye a cloth. The color is permanent." I looked at him, my heart aching for the man I thought he was, and for the woman I had been when I believed in him. "You should go, Leo." He stood, hesitated for a moment as if he wanted to say more, and then turned and walked away. I watched him go, feeling not a sense of victory, but the quiet, somber finality of a chapter closing. Months have passed. The Oakhaven Mill is now a hive of activity. The sound of hammers and saws mingles with laughter and music. Zoe's vision is taking shape, brick by brick. The large, sun-filled rooms are being transformed into studios and workshops. My own studio will soon move into the ground floor space in the old dye room, right by the river. My mother is here almost every day, her hands back in the soil she loves. She's designing the community garden that will fill the courtyard, a lush, sprawling space where she's already planning to plant a patch of indigo and madder root for me. Sometimes, standing by the huge, arched windows of the mill, watching the river flow by, I think about the Davenports. I don't feel anger or triumph. I feel a quiet gratitude for the lesson they taught me. They showed me the difference between a price and a value. They forced me to recognize the strength I had always possessed, a strength cultivated in my mother's garden, in the patient work of my own two hands. I didn't set out to ruin their world. I set out to protect mine. And in doing so, I found I wasn't just building a sanctuary for a community, I was finally, truly, building one for myself. A place where my work, my history, and my mother were not things to be overcome or hidden, but were the very foundation of everything beautiful and strong and real. A place where I was not an acquisition, but an architect of my own life.